So anyway, we'll get to that here in just a second. I want to go to Indiana and discuss this supposedly controversial Indiana religious freedom law made to order for the modern-day drive-by media. On Saturday and Sunday, ABC, CBS, NBC, virtually every mainstream media organization condemned a new law in Indiana that would protect private businesses from government infringement on their religious freedom. What this means is that the Obama administration wants to do away, and the media is assisting, with the whole notion of free markets, the Constitution, the freedom of religion clause, and the administration wants the power to mandate everything as much as they can. Now, the news organizations, ABC, CBS, NBC, and all the others, just had a collective cow over this. And rather than provide any kind of balance, rather than explain the history and the context and the true meaning and detail of the Indiana law, they predictably began to trash the legislation and Indiana as a bunch of bigots opening the door to discrimination against gays and lesbians. Even the CEO of Apple Incorporated, Tim Cook, took to the pages of the Washington Post and wrote an editorial condemning this kind of legislation, not just in Indiana, but wherever it might be, and making it out to be the example of the worst instincts among us that we have here, discriminating against people, and it's so un-American and so forth. And Mr. Snerdley asked me today, said, when's the last time Tim Cook wrote an op-ed in the Shanghai Daily News ripping the Chi-Coms? I mean, the Chi-Coms impinge on everybody's freedom, particularly religious freedom. And China, of course, is a major, major Apple market. And I had to think about it. Snerdley asked me the question. I can't think of the time when an Apple executive, all I can think of when it comes to the Chi-Coms is Google caving to the Chi-Coms on what kind of search results will not be seen and produced by Google when Chinese Chi-Com citizens are searching. But what is fascinating about this, and it's becoming an even more prevalent reality. On the one hand, on any issue, on the one hand, we have the reality. We have facts. We have history, we have context, we have truth. On the other hand, we have the absence of all of that, the misrepresentation of the facts, misrepresentation of the truth, misrepresentation of the context. And in addition to that, then we hype it all. The media is hyping it all with a bunch of emotional propaganda that is designed specifically to misinform people about what has happened, particularly in this case in this law in Indiana. It's like everybody's forgotten the Hobby Lobby ruling. The Supreme Court Hobby Lobby. Does anybody remember this? It's like it never happened. Or that the Restoration Act of 1993, which the Supreme Court upheld last year in the Hobby Lobby case. Everybody's acting like that's not the law of the land. The Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1993 was introduced by Chuck Schumer, Democrat, New York, March 11, 1993. It was passed by a unanimous House of Representatives and a near unanimous Senate. There were only 3 dissenting votes. And it was eagerly signed into law by none other than Slick Willie. A law that is practically identical to what happened in Indiana. This is, if you want another similarity, it's like what happened to Arizona. Arizona passes some immigration law that pretty much paralleled, reflected, maybe even you could say copied federal immigration law. And the reason Arizona did it was that the federal government was not enforcing its law. The borders were wide open. There was no effort being made to curb illegal immigration in Arizona. So Arizona passed a law that held, for the most part, the identical circumstances in it that federal law does. And Obama sued the state of Arizona. But there was nothing in the Arizona law that had not already passed the United States Congress and been signed into law by numerous American presidents. And it's the same thing here. The Indiana law isn't anything new. And the Supreme Court has affirmed in the Hobby Lobby case, and when they upheld Hobby Lobby, they upheld the Restoration Act, Religious Restoration Act, 1993. There's literally nothing new that's happened here in Indiana that hasn't already been upheld at the Supreme Court and passed. U.S. Congress signed into law, in this case by Bill Clinton. But you would think, because this affords the media and the left the perfect opportunity. What we've got here, folks, if I may draw, it's not the perfect analogy, but it's pretty close. We've got hands up, don't shoot, except in this case, it's supposedly discrimination against gays and lesbians and bisexuals and transgenders. And that's not what it is. It's a law that says the freedom of religion clause in the First Amendment has been affirmed. But you see, it's selected. You remember the case involving peyote? Remember that, Mr. Snerdley? A bunch of Native Americans wanted an exemption from federal laws against marijuana and similar things like peyote because it was part of their religion. Peyote was required, they said, certain religious ceremonies, and they got an exemption. Peyote was claimed legal because it was said that we could not infringe on the religious freedoms of Native Americans. And I remember when that argument came up because then everybody said, you know what's going to happen now? Every crackpot and oddball out there is going to claim everything he's doing is because of his religion as a means of getting away with it. And now we've done an absolute 180. Now a law passed to affirm the religious freedom of the people of Indiana has been restated. And the media is telling you that the governor of Indiana, Mike Pence, who we know here, he's a good guy. He's a good man. And the people of Indiana have decided that they don't like gays and they don't want gays anywhere in the state and they don't want gays doing business. So the gays are fine. You don't want it, we'll leave. And we're going to take all our business with. That's not what the law is. But that's how it's being construed. It's how it's being portrayed. And on one side, we've got the facts, the history, the context, and it doesn't matter. Over here, we have what the media is saying about it, purely emotional. It is driving people's emotions and creating almost a replica of the lie that hands up, don't shoot was. As I say, it's not a perfect analogy, but in terms of helping you understand what's going on here, it might work. More when we come back, more details, plus some comments from Governor Pence. He was on Good Morning America. I'm sorry, this week. Yesterday, he was on This Week with Stephanopoulos. And what the drive-bys have been playing segments of it all day. And they've been claiming, boy, this guy Pence, what an idiot. My God, he should never have gone on TV. Why, this guy looks like an absolute troglodyte. This is one of the worst interviews we have ever seen. This guy just dug his own grave and started shoveling the dirt on himself. That's how bad they're trying to portray it. Because Pence was, again, dealing, here's what the law is, these are the facts, and that doesn't matter to people over here who are attempting to further an agenda and, I might add, further the brand destruction of Republicans and the GOP. And this is, by the way, this is how and why a bunch of mainstream Republicans are running around all, we got to get rid of the social issues. We just got to get, can't win a thing if it's abortion. We got to get rid of social issues. We got to stick to economic matters. They don't want to have these battles. They don't care if they got facts and history and context on their side. They don't even want to engage. They just want to sweep the social issues off the table and declare defeat. Let the left have whatever they want socially. Let them whatever they. We want to win elections, and we can't if our party is identified with the social crap. And this, the media knows, and this, the Democrat Party knows, and this is why they continue to hammer this stuff, even though none of what they're saying, or very little of it, has any basis in truth. Rush Limbaugh, half my brain tied behind my back just to make it fair. I've been doing that for a lot of years, folks, and it hasn't hurt yet. It hasn't hurt yet. And if it ever does, ever need a full brain, we'll employ it. It hasn't happened yet. Adam in Anderson, Indiana, you're first today on the phones, and it's great to have you here. Hello.
Thanks, Rush. Hey, really a big pleasure to talk to you. I'm 34 years old, so I guess I'm an old millennial, but I've been listening to you since 1998, since I was 8 years old.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm sure it's helped you well, too.
Well, I have a little bit of insight on the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, being that I live in Indiana. I've lived here for about 8 years, and I grew up in Illinois, but I've had a few people who don't agree with me on a lot of issues, say that it's an open door for discrimination and all that type of thing. And I just look at them and I say, really? And they say, yeah, our president, Barack Obama, he would never, okay that or agree with that or believe in that. And I said, really? I said, in 1998 in Illinois, it's been the law, state law in Illinois since 1998. I said, there was actually a state senator in 1998 who actually voted for that. I said, I can't remember his name. And I said, oh, yeah, it was Barack Hussein Obama.
And what do they say to that when you tell them?
They get real quiet, and then they go, well, are you sure? And I go, yeah, you can look it up if you want.
Well, they either accuse you of making it up, and if they then think you didn't make it up, they go, Obama's changed. He doesn't think that anymore. Troglodytes like you think that, but Obama doesn't think that anymore by virtue of what's happened now.
Right.
But again, here's the thing. You get in an argument with people who believe what they believe and have nothing to do with facts. If you start throwing facts at them, you're never going to... I mean, I don't blame you for doing it. Don't misunderstand. But you're not going to persuade them. Because they aren't dealing with facts. Facts, context, history are not in any way relevant to what they think. And so you can give them every fact in the world that would disabuse them of every notion they've got. You can tell them they're wrong here, you're wrong. It doesn't matter. Because they, in their minds, are good people. And their intentions matter. And so they're not discriminating, and you are, and that's it. Eugene Volokh is a law professor at UCLA School of Law. He has a website called the Volokh Conspiracy. In fact, he even has a blog at the Washington Post. And I have a post here from the Volokh Conspiracy in December 2013 from his archives called What is the Religious Freedom Act? Freedom Restoration Act. 1993, Congress enacted the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which gave religious objectors a statutory presumptive entitlement to exemption from generally applicable laws, subject to strict scrutiny. Government may substantially burden a person's exercise of religion only if it demonstrates that application of the burden to the person is the least restrictive means of furthering a compelling governmental interest. Now, I can tell you that your average low-information voter has no idea what I just read, no idea what I just said, and no idea what this means, and never will understand what this means. But the vote for this proposition, as I just mentioned, was unanimous in the House. It was 97-3 in the Senate. And basically what the Religious Freedom Restoration Act is what just happened in Indiana. Pretty much on par. Back in 1993, a Democrat president signed into law. A unanimous House passed it, Senate 97-3. It was meant to apply to all branches of government and both to federal and state law. I have to take a break because of the constraints of time, but there's more. Don't go away. What this is actually, well, not just actually, there's many aspects to it, but this made to order for the Democrat Party and left-wing gay activist fundraising. And that's another element of this so-called righteous, indignant opposition. Back in a second. Yes, of course it's frustrating. What are you going to do, though? All you can do is tell people the truth, and then that's it. I mean, I can't assemble everybody that lives in this country and put them in a room and tell them the truth and have them leave thinking they know it all. I mean, I would love for that to be able to happen, but I can't do it. Greetings and welcome back. Great to have you. Rush Limbaugh, the EIB Network, and the Limbaugh Institute for Advanced Conservative Studies. It's frustrating. Folks, it really is frustrating. This whole thing with the Religious Freedom Restoration Act and what happened in Indiana, I'm not kidding. On the one side here, we have facts, truth, history, context. Over here, we've got something not related to that at all that is sufficing as the news of the day on this. So all I can do is come here and give you the facts, give you the truth of the history of this and what this means, and beyond that, if the primary conveyors of information in this country are going to abandon that and ignore it, and there's nothing that can be done about it, you just throw it open, and you have to trust that at some point the truth will out. Now, let me, by the way, greetings and welcome back. 800-282-2882 if you want to be on the program. Let me continue with the history of this, because I want you to realize here that what Indiana has done is they're just the latest. They're not setting any trends here, and they certainly are not blazing any trails. In one sense, they're just the next in line. They're Johnny-come-latelys. Again, now, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, 1993, which gave religious objectors a statutory presumptive entitlement to exemption from generally applicable laws. Let me translate that for you. In 1993, Congress enacted the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which gave people the religious right to invoke their religious principles and be exempt from applicable laws in the process if they were, in fact, invoking religious principles. That's all that Indiana has done here, has simply affirmed that on a state basis, which many other states have done before. When Bill Clinton signed this bill back in 1993, let me read to you what he said. The power of God is such that even in the legislative process, miracles can happen. That's what Bill Clinton said. Kid you not. Now, what it was about back then was letting Indian kids smoke peyote. That's all it was about. I brought up peyote for a reason. That's what the Religious Freedom Restoration Act was all about, was peyote. Indians, Native Americans, claiming that they were exempt from the law, making it illegal because it was part of their religion. And the U.S. Congress affirmed that unanimously in the House and by 97-3 in the Senate. Even after the Restoration of Freedom Act, many members of the Native American Church still had issues using peyote in their ceremonies, which led to the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And there were some amendments to it in 1994, which state this: the use, the possession, or transportation of peyote by an Indian for bona fide traditional ceremony purposes in connection with the practice of a traditional Indian religion is lawful and shall not be prohibited by the U.S. or any state. No Indian shall be penalized or discriminated against on the basis of such use, possession, or transportation. And Bill Clinton said, while signing the Restoration of Religious Freedom Act, he said, the power of God is such that even in the legislative process, miracles can happen. And this was about peyote. Just to show you how things change, it's a Democrat president, admittedly in his first year, invoking God. God is perceived to be the problem now with the current Democrat Party. This is an example of a law coming back to bite you. But everybody back then was so eager for the Indian vote and so eager to be on the side of the angels where a minority was concerned that when the Indians say, you can't take away our peyote, it's part of our religion, they were granted exemption from the law. That's all that's happened in Indiana. Now, folks, look, I could spend all 3 hours on this if I wanted to. The bottom line is the facts are the facts. The law is the law. And that's on one hand. On the other hand, none of that matters to the news of the day. The news of the day is not related to facts, history, context whatsoever. The daily soap opera is such that the narrative today is that once again another Democrat minority is being besmirched and impugned and denied liberty and freedom, and it is our beloved gay and lesbian brothers and sisters. And we're not going to put up with it. We've had enough of this since this country was founded. There's been too much discrimination, and we're not going to put up with it anymore. And so now gay groups and lesbian, gay, bisexual, gender, transit, whatever groups they're announcing, they're all getting out of Indiana. They're going to cancel business meetings they had, conventions, all that. They're scramming. They're leaving. Now, you might think, Russ, this is an awfully fine point. It's an awfully fine line, isn't it? Well, it wasn't with peyote. It wasn't when other states came up with their own version of the law, which has happened many times since. Ready for this? Since 1997, and in some measure even prior to that, about a dozen states have enacted similar state-level Religious Freedom Restoration Acts as to state law, and about a dozen more states have interpreted their state constitutions to follow the court's previous rulings. Indiana's not alone here. There are at least 25 states, 26 states right along with them, which means half of the states, as we sit here today, have their own Religious Freedom Restoration Act laws, or else they interpret their laws to follow the Supreme Court previous rulings, which would now include Hobby Lobby. Hobby Lobby is exactly what this was about. Have people already forgotten Hobby Lobby? Yes, they have, conveniently so. Therefore, the rule now is that there is a religious exemption as to federal statutes under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and as to state statutes in about half the states that have state Religious Freedom Restoration Acts or state constitutional exemption regimes or laws. Religious objectors in those states may demand exemptions from laws that substantially burden the objector's practice, meaning the religious person's practice of their religion, which the government must now grant unless it can show that applying the law is the least restrictive means of serving a compelling government interest. So what exactly is so controversial about this? The bottom line, what is so controversial about the Religious Freedom Restoration Act that Indiana has passed? And the answer is nothing. It's just another way to gin up controversy about gay rights, which is the cause célèbre of the day, and particularly with millennials. And to also keep the donor base churning. I mean, this is going to cause Democrat gay donors to be sending money to the Democrat Party like never before, because the objective is the world is gunning for American gays, and only the Democrat Party can stop it. And that's not what's happened here. The Religious Freedom Restoration Act, let's go back to its origins. Peyote had nothing to do with gays. It had nothing to do with lesbians, transgenders, bisexuals, none of that. It had to do with the Indians' version of pot and their claim that it was part of their religious ceremonies. And guess what? The government found in their favor. So now they're exempt from whatever laws everybody else has to obey on peyote. And then gay marriage came along. I'm really jumping forward here in years. Gay marriage came along, and gay couples purposely targeted certain businesses to challenge this. In Denver, if you're getting married and you're gay, there are plenty of places you can go that'll bake a cake for you. But you pick the place that won't to give yourself a cause, and you gin everything up, and then you claim you're being discriminated against. And then everybody piles on the bakery that will not bake a cake for a gay wedding because it violates their religion. And the bad guys happen to be the religious people who refuse to violate their religion, so they won't bake the cake. Everybody jumps on them. And in the case of what happened, the bake shop in Denver, they're out of business. They lost their business. They were so tarred and feathered, so stigmatized that they lost their business. And this is by design. There's any number of places in Denver the gay couple could have gone, I'm sure. But what people refuse to acknowledge or admit is that everything with the left is politics. Everything is an opportunity to advance the agenda. There are plenty of gay couples that wouldn't want any part of this. They'll go, if they're going to get married, find a place that'll make them a cake. Go there, have the wedding, be happy, have the reception, be happy. Go wherever, Saks Fifth Avenue to fill the registry and go adopt a kid and just live. Others say, aha, we've got a chance here to attack the Republicans, attack conservatives, and advance a liberal agenda. Let's go find a bake shop that won't serve us. And they do. 25 states already have things like this on the books. Indiana is just the latest to come along. And it's because the people of Indiana have determined that religious people are the ones that are being attacked and discriminated against when you get right down to it. But see, that's not deemed to be possible because Christians, religion people, are deemed to be in the majority. And the majority cannot possibly be discriminated against. It's simply not possible. Just like a man cannot be raped. No matter what happens, it can't be raped. Not possible. And a Christian is a majority member, therefore can't be discriminated against. Christians are the discriminators. Christians are the oppressors because they're the majority. And if you want to know what modern-day Democrat Party politics is about, it's attacking every majority, real or perceived, that exists and claim a grievance because of it. And this is how you tear down institutions and traditions that have defined a culture and society in a country. And that's the objective here. So 25 states have fought back. We're going to stand up for the people who have their religion. We're going to stand up for the people who stand behind their morality and so forth. And we're not going to sit by and made them be forced to act in violation of their religious principles. And when that happens, then here comes the left, armed for battle to tear down anybody that's involved in either the Christian business here and or its defenders. You remember Chick-fil-A. I mean, these stories are fairly common and fairly recent. Let's go to the audio sound bites. Again, I mentioned that Mike Pence is the governor of Indiana. He was on This Week with Stephanopoulos yesterday. And the drive-bys are saying it was a horrible interview. This guy just embarrassed himself. He should quit. He should resign. This is one of the worst interviews we have ever seen. This guy was clearly over his head and out of his league. He had no business being on TV. It was such an embarrassment. Let's listen. Stephanopoulos said yes or no. If a florist in Indiana refuses to serve a gay couple at their wedding, is that legal now in Indiana?
This is where this debate has gone with misinformation and frankly,
it's just a question, sir. Yes or no?
Well, there's been shameless rhetoric about my state and about this law and about its intention all over the internet. The Religious Freedom Restoration Act has been on the books for more than 20 years. It does not apply, George, to disputes between individuals unless government action is involved. The issue here is tolerance a two-way street or not? Indiana steps forward to protect the constitutional rights and privileges of freedom of religion for people of faith and families of faith in our state. And this avalanche of intolerance that's been poured on our state is just outrageous.
Now, he's exactly right about that, but he's not allowed to say that because as a white Republican, he's not a minority. He cannot speak as one. He cannot talk about defending people who are the victims of an avalanche of intolerance, because it is not possible to be intolerant of a majority. In fact, it's almost a calling. You are almost required If you're going to be a good liberal, if you're going to be a good Democrat, a good leftist, you must explicitly be intolerant of Christians and of majorities. But majorities cannot, I mean, you can't ever say a majority is discriminated against or a member of a majority. And you can't ever say that members of the majority are victims of intolerance, because they're the evil ones. They're the ones doing all these things that need to be fixed. And Pence's point is, wait a minute, well, he's got many points here. One of his points is, we're standing up for people who are being discriminated against by being forced by government to violate their religious principles. That's where the law gets involved. And if the government's going to get behind people and demand that others have their religion violated, we are standing up to defend that. And the left says that's not legitimate. Those people do not deserve defense because they are members of a majority. And as such, a majority can never be discriminated against. They're the ones that do the discriminating. And a majority can never be the victim of intolerance because the majorities are the ones who are intolerant. I have to take a time out. We'll be back after this. And the full statement of Bill Clinton now when he signed the federal Religious Freedom Restoration Act into law. This is 1993. Bill Clinton said, "So today I ask you to also think of that. We are a people of faith. We have been so secure in that faith that we have enshrined in our Constitution protection for people who profess no faith. And good for us for doing so. That is what the First Amendment's all about. But let us never believe that the freedom of religion imposes on any of us some responsibility to run from our convictions. Let us instead respect one another's faiths. Fight to the death to preserve the right of every American to practice whatever convictions he or she has, but bring our values back to the table of American discourse to heal our troubled land." So, again, this was about peyote. That was Bill Clinton when he signed the Religious Freedom Restoration Act into law. Now, the people that are in the process here of making news out of what happened in Indiana, acting righteously indignant and protesting it from now to the end of the day, what really has them ticked off, what really has them bummed out about the Indiana law and about the Religious Freedom Restoration Act in total right now, is that this is how private citizens can defend themselves against harassment and intimidation by gay activists. It's a technique that has been drummed up. It's been created by the Democrats. The Democrats created this whole thing for peyote, and now it's coming back to bite them. See, at the center of this, folks, is religion, and a hate for it, a fear of it. The left wants no part of organized religion. That's why global warming exists and all these other issues. They take the place of organized religion. And they're doing their best to tear it down. That's what the assaults in the Catholic Church are about. Never-ending constant assaults on Christianity in general are about. Because Christianity is morality. They view it as judgmentalism. They view it as definitive. This is what's right. This is what's wrong. They don't want any part of that. They don't want to have to be conscious of right or wrong. They don't want it be reminded of right and wrong. They don't want it in their own consciousness, right and wrong. They don't want it because it's all shackles. Morality is shackles. The idea of right and wrong, shackles. Limits on freedom and behavior and so forth. And so there's been a concerted effort by interest groups on the left, not just gay activists, but a whole bunch of different fringe groups on the left, to attack religion and what it stands for and the people of it. And so now here comes this Indiana law on the trail of Hobby Lobby and Chick-fil-A and a number of other examples. And it turns out now that private citizens are able to use a law enacted by Democrats to protect themselves from the militant leftist agenda. So that's got to be torn down, and that's what's in the process of happening here. And that's why the mischaracterization, misrepresentation, disinformation, misinformation, is why facts, history, reality, truth, and consequences don't have any play here. Here's more from Mike Pence. Stephanopoulos said, when you say, Governor, that tolerance is a two-way street, does that mean that Christians who want to refuse service, or people of any other faith who want to refuse service to gays and lesbians, that it's now legal in the state of Indiana? It's just a simple yes or no question. Why won't you answer it?
This isn't about disputes between individuals. It's about government overreach. Bill Clinton signed the Religious Freedom Restoration Act in 1993.
I remember that.
Then state senator, I bet you do, then state senator Barack Obama voted for it when he was in the state Senate of Illinois, the very same language. Frankly, some of the media coverage of this has been shameless and reckless, and the online attacks against the people of our state, I'm just not going to stand for it.
None of that matters to Stephanopoulos. It's not that all he cares about. This is Stephanopoulos is, once again, you may as well go back and put in Pence's place Mitt Romney. And the question, do you believe in contraception? You think state-sponsored contraception? What are you talking about? It's a yes or no question, Governor. Do you believe in contraception, or do you believe in stopping? Do you believe in preventing? And Romney had no idea what it was all about. It was not an issue anywhere. And Stephanopoulos he inserted it and finally got an answer from Romney. It didn't matter what Romney said. When he answered it, that's when the war on women began. That's when it was created. And that's what Stephanopoulos is trying to do here. Stephanopoulos was with Clinton in 1993 when Clinton made the statement that I just read to you. When everybody was celebrating this back in 1993, because they were protecting a minority against the ravages of the Christian and white majority in America, trying to deny our native Indian brothers and sisters their religious rights by denying them the use of peyote. And Clinton and the Democrats unanimously came to their rescue, said, you want to use peyote in your religion? By God, you go right ahead. We're going to affirm your religious freedom. We're going to affirm your religious rights to do it, and nobody can stop you. Well, it's kind of tit for tat now, and 25 states have signed on to it in one way or another. Stephanopoulos wasn't through. He finally said, well, that may be. We've tried to be responsible. Let's talk about the media. One suggested fix to your law would say that this chapter of the law does not establish or eliminate a defense to a claim under any federal, state, or local law protecting civil rights or preventing discrimination. Is that the kind of clarification that you're talking about here?
George, look, we're not going to change the law, okay? We're not going to change this law. It has been tested in courts for more than 2 decades. There's a lot of people in this country who are concerned about government overreach into their religious liberty, and I'm one of them, and I stand with them.
Imagine that. That's all you have to do is you just stand up to them. He's still governor today. Mike Pence is still breathing. I'm told he had breakfast and lunch, and he's going to have dinner tonight. Yeah, the media may be targeting him and the media may hate him, but he's still alive and he's still living to tell the tale. Stood up to him. But he's exactly on point here. What this is about, let's go back to the case that everybody knows. And that is a gay couple walks into a bakery in Denver and says, we're getting married and we want you to bake the cake. And the people that own the bakery say, sorry, take your business elsewhere. We don't believe in gay marriage. Our religion forbids it. And so we're not going to bake your cake. The people didn't go somewhere else. They went to the government. They went and they sued and they demanded that the government come in and force the bakery to bake them a cake. That is a violation of their religious rights. That's making them violate their religious beliefs. First Amendment says we have total religious freedom. Hello, peyote. And that's what Pence is talking about. That's been the game. The game has been to find bakeries like the one in Denver, walk in there knowing full well that you're walking into an establishment owned by religious people that disagree with you, and have them refuse to serve you or bake the cake in this case. And then you walk out and you go to the government. State government, federal government, doesn't matter. And you make the government make that little business bake that cake. That is the government overstepping and violating the Constitution. Henceforth, we have the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. It's actually should be unnecessary. It says right there in the First Amendment what we're talking about here. The fact that we have to come up with another law to reaffirm what's already in the Constitution is bad enough. That's on one hand. And then over here, on the other hand, is the news of the day, which has none of the truth in it whatsoever. Okay, take a break and we'll get back to your phone calls. And in the next hour, details of how this Iranian nuclear deal predictably falling apart. So don't go away.